What's up everyone, this is Pooka bringing you another Pokemon TCG video, and in this video we're going to break down a deck that's gotten a lot of hype, a lot of buzz recently. That's going to be a Dragonite deck. Now this popped up at the Virginia Regional Championships a couple weeks ago. It was created by the mastermind Dylan Bryan, who just seems to come up with all sorts of crazy decks. Last year at the World Championships, he was the one playing that Flareon deck that had everybody scratching their heads. And now again, he came up with this Dragonite deck, which we'll take a look at here. Now it's running a lot of crazy stuff. People have been really trying to figure out what is in this deck, and I tried to build one myself. Now I can't promise that this is the exact deck list, but this should get the point across, should show you why the strategy is so effective, and it should be actually fairly close, because I got a lot of information from players who actually played against him at the event and got to see a lot of what he was playing with. So let's jump right in to the strategy of the deck. It's going to revolve around Dragonite, obviously. But the only attack you're going to be using is Deafen. It does 60 damage, and it stops your opponent from playing item cards during their next turn. So if you can take away item cards from an opponent, you can do all sorts of interesting things. You can take away a lot of their strategy. Just think about how many decks rely on item cards, and think about how many they actually play. Gosh, a lot of decks might actually play 20 item cards or more. Think about a Darkrai deck. It could play like 30 item cards. And they just can't play any of them once you use Deafen. And if you're taking away a third or a half of someone's deck, that's pretty powerful by itself. However, doing 60 damage isn't always enough to beat those, big EX Pokemon and some other stuff that can hurt you pretty badly. So Dragonite does need a partner, or maybe a few, in order to be effective. Deafen on its own, probably not going to get the job done most of the time. Even though it does have 150 HP, it's probably not going to cut it. So we do have some partners for Dragonite to help it out. The number one partner, I would say, is Silver Mirror. When you have this attached to your Dragonite, you prevent all effects of attacks, including damage, done to it by Team Plasma Pokemon. Team Plasma Pokemon have been very popular. For example, Lugia EX and Snorlax with Thundurus EX. That's been a very popular archetype recently. And with Silver Mirror, none of those can hurt you. And when you use Deafen with a Silver Mirror attached, they can't play a Tool Scrapper to discard it. And, well, if all they have are Team Plasma Pokemon, you just Deafen until you win. Pretty simple. Pretty powerful. Just one Silver Mirror and Deafen, and you can win against that deck. Also, this is useful against Genesect EX, which is a Team Plasma Pokemon as well, because, well, they can't play G-Booster either if they can't play item cards. So, Silver Mirror and Deafen, this is probably the number one combo for Dragonite, but there's more. So, we're already playing Pokemon tools, so we can also play Garbodor, which has Garbotoxin. If you have a tool attached to Garbodor, you can take away your opponent's abilities. Now you're taking away item cards and abilities? Well, that's pretty powerful. Think about how many decks rely on abilities too. And you're just all of a sudden shutting down all of these strategies with a simple combo like Dragonite and Garbodor. This is probably most useful against Blastoise decks and Emboar decks that really rely on that energy acceleration, but it's also very useful against those Team Plasma decks that also play Genesect EX and can use Red Signal to move your Dragonite out of the way and attack something that doesn't have a Silver Mirror. Garbotoxin prevents that strategy, and now, not only can they not Tool Scrapper your Silver Mirror, not only can they not play a G-Booster, but they cannot Red Signal around your Dragonite either, and they're just kind of stuck. You pretty much win. So, Garbodor, a very strong card, even stronger when your opponent can't play Tool Scrapper to, get their abilities back. So, Dragonite and Garbodor seem like an obvious pair. Besides that, though, there are some decks that just don't use abilities and can beat you anyway. For example, Darkrai decks really don't need abilities to beat you. They can just attack with Night Spear and they're probably going to do pretty well against Dragonite. So against Darkrai decks, you might favor this Reuniclus line instead. Now it's a small line, it's just 2 Solosis, 1 Reuniclus, because we got to fit a lot of stuff into this deck. So we got to skimp on some things here. But Reuniclus has damage swap. So let's say you are facing a Darkrai deck, and they're starting to Night Spear, and they're going to knock you out in 2 hits, and you might lose the exchange. Well, if you get out Reuniclus, you can just move the damage off of Dragonite somewhere else, and then your Dragonite can continue to deafen, and you'll continue the item lock, and you'll probably win. Now, this is very powerful to keep your Dragonite alive. Reuniclus does a very good job in a lot of different matchups to give you an upper hand and just help your Dragonite survive. Now, you might be thinking, well, what if your opponent's playing Darkrai Garbodor? Then they take away your Reuniclus too. Well, the cool thing is, if they do have a Garbodor in play, you can just play a Tool Scrapper, discard their Pokemon tool on their Garbodor, and then if you go back to using Deafen, they can't attach another one. So you get your abilities the rest of the game because they can't attach another tool to a Garbodor. So this is very awesome. You have a lot of ways to really manipulate your opponent's Pokemon and really manipulate what they can and can't do. And that is the entire strength of this deck. You're trying to lock down your opponent. So we have Reuniclus, but we really want somewhere to move the damage. It doesn't just disappear. We got to move it somewhere. So we have 1 Cresselia EX in the deck. Now, we don't even run the energy to attack with it because we really don't ever need to attack with it. We want to keep using Deafen. We want to keep locking down items. But we're using it for the Sparkling Particles ability. In between turns, heal 10 damage. So it's just a place to put your damage, and it's going to slowly heal itself off. Works very well with Reuniclus. If we had space, we could play cards like Max Potion too, but I don't think that's going to be a possibility in this deck. But we have Cresselia EX to help out there. We also have Mr. Mime for the early going. Since Solosis here only has 30 HP, we do need Mr. Mime to block some bench damage to help Solosis survive long enough to actually evolve it into the Reuniclus. Now we also have Virizion EX. It has the Verdant Wind ability. If Dragonite has a grass energy attached to it, can't be affected by special conditions. A lot of the ways that people would try to stop the Deafen lock to get their item back, to get their items back, would be things like a Sableye using Confuse Ray, or just any way to inflict status conditions on Dragonite, and then maybe you miss a turn of Deafen and, you can't do anything. But Verdant Wind just takes that away, and allows you to keep using Deafen over and over. This also should give you a free win against any Gothitelle Excelgor decks that try to use Excelgor's deck in cover, since, well, you don't get paralyzed or poisoned. So Virizion EX, for 1 card, this can help you against a lot of things. Now, one thing that could be a problem is Mewtwo EX. If they build up a big Mewtwo and X-Ball your Dragonite and knock it out in 1 hit, well, there's not much you can do about that. So, in order to counteract this strategy, we run a Mewtwo of our own. If they load and commit a bunch of energy to a Mewtwo, we can respond with one since we're already playing double colorless energy. And this is just a nice attacker in general to have. So we run 1 Mewtwo EX. It's not an ideal attacker because we don't get to Deafen. So if you are going to use X-Ball, you should probably play an N before you do that, so your opponent's hand is limited once again. But those are the Pokemon in the deck. The Pokemon lines are very interesting, but I figured this is the only way you can really fit them. We have 3 Dratini and 3 Dragonite, no Dragonair. So we're very reliant on Rare Candy, which allows us to skip a stage from Dratini to Dragonite. You could play a Dragonair if you can find some card to cut out of this deck, but Rare Candy seems to be the way to go. We also have 2 Solosis, 1 Reuniclus. I wish we could play more, but you only get 60 cards to work with. Then we have 2 Trubbish, 2 Garbodor. Garbodor seems like a very important card in a lot of matchups, so we want a 2-2 line to make sure we can get that out. I also forgot to mention Jirachi EX. This is a nice card. Stellar Guidance. allows you to search for a supporter card. So if you can search for a Pokemon, you can search for a Jirachi, which turns into a supporter card. It's a very nice consistency card to have in your deck. For the trainers, we have pretty simple trainers and supporters here. Just 4N, 4 Juniper, 4 Skyla. It's really all we need. And then 2 Tropical Beach. Since this is a Stage 2 deck, Tropical Beach normally is necessary to set up. Makes this deck a little pricey to play, but that's what you get when you're playing at the top competitive levels. You might be able to get away with not running it, but you're going to have a better time if you do run it. Other tools we have, Silver Bangle, 2 of those. If you have this attached to Dragonite, now Deafen does 90 damage, which, for example, against a Darkrai EX, for example. If you're using Deafen against a Darkrai and you have a Silver Bangle, now you're doing 90 and 90 again, which knocks out the Darkrai in 2 hits. If you don't have Silver Bangle, it would be 3 hits, 60, 60, and 60. So, you have to attack 1 less time with a Silver Bangle attached to Dragonite, and that makes all the difference. Also, against something like a Rayquaza EX, now you can knock it out in 1 hit, or even a Black Kyurem EX. 1 hit with Silver Bangle, Deafen, take 2 prizes on a Dragon-type EX. Pretty powerful. Then we have 1 Float Stone because, well, that's always just a nice tool to have, and maybe something gets stuck active with a retreat cost, and you want to get away, find a way to get it out of the active spot. So that's it for the tools and the supporters. Otherwise, we just have 4 Ultra Ball. Pretty simple. You want to search for your Pokemon, 2 Level Ball. You want to get your basics out very quickly. Level Ball can search for a lot of Pokemon in this deck. You can search for Dratini, Jirachi, Mr. Mime, Solosis, Reuniclus, and Trubbish. So 2 Level Ball to get a Dratini out right away, and also one of your supporting basics, Solosis or Trubbish, whichever one you feel you would need for the matchup. Otherwise, we do have a Super Rod, just because we are so thin on a lot of Pokemon in the deck. We only run, 3 Dratini, 3 Dragonite. Super Rod can help out. And then Computer Search for the Ace-Spec card. Since this deck revolves so much around just establishing your lock as quickly as possible with Deafen, we want to run the Ace-Spec card that gives us the best odds of getting set up quickly. And that's going to be Computer Search. If you want consistency, Computer Search is the Ace-Spec for you. So that's the one that's in this deck. And then the energy, pretty simple. 4 double colorless energy, since that lets you use Deafen, and 6 grass, because, well, we have Virizion EX to use the Verdant Wind ability. And that's it. That is this deck. It's very strong against most decks in the metagame. It's very heavily teched out to beat specific decks, and it's a little complicated. But a lot of people asked to see this deck, so here it is. Just thought I would show it off. This is my take on the deck. Again, this is not the exact list Dylan Bryan used. Well, it might be. Nobody really knows, except Dylan, I guess. But I think this is pretty close. And if it's not his list, it's a good starting point. So if you want to try this deck out, give it a go. It's definitely interesting. It might actually be a little boring, because all you're going to do is use Deafen over and over and over. And it's actually a very annoying lock deck where you just kind of try to prevent your opponent from doing anything. But hey, it's a viable strategy, and maybe give it a try. So that's going to wrap up this deck breakdown. Hope you guys enjoyed. I will have some more videos for you soon. This is Pooka from the Top Cut, and I will see you guys next time.